5 of the 48-hour art check, and now's where you pretend we have our animated intro. 48-hour art check.
I forgot to export it.
We'll work on that. But as you guys know, if you're kind of tuning in, if you haven't been tuning in the last few times, we've recently switched our streaming platform, and so there's a little bit of adjustment that's going to happen as we're doing that. But so far, we're kind of liking this Stream Deck thing. So
StreamYard.
My goodness, Stream Deck, my brain. So now that I've gotten the streaming service that we use wrong. So let's do our art check. I think it's pretty clear, at least if you guys can't tell visually. I think we're both kind of at the burning candles at both ends. So
yep.
Definitely one of those art checks where I'm like, I know it's necessary, I know it's good for the art, but man, it's going to be a rough one. So we will slug through, and hopefully the topic will get us going as well. So what have you gotten done in the last 48 hours?
Do we want to start with working out?
Oh yeah, that's right. We were starting with workouts.
And I've got this ready because
Okay.
because this is probably the most boring part. So let's just do 10-15 seconds.
Okay.
I ran yesterday, didn't run today, and I've done pull-ups and curls both days. So that's where I'm at with that.
Awesome. Did my rowing, did my lifts, did the extra amount that I committed to last time. Was not able to do even the free hang because that part of my back is still recovering from that first time. So I'm not going to press it, but I will probably take that on next time. So
cool. As far as I gotta put up. Did I not? I don't know. As far as what I've gotten done, I put up a video. I'm not doing daily videos, but I am cataloging major milestones. So put up a video talking about this character's walk cycle. And then I also rigged this guy. So I designed and rigged him. I still need to get him a side view and sitting, but he's mostly rigged. He can't walk in this view. So there's probably going to be like a 3/4 view. I've got a ton more work to do, but this is his basic rig. So,
oh man, I love the beating heart.
Yeah, thanks. How about you?
Okay, let me see if I can share this properly. Oh, thank you. So I got the panel finished, the rough pencils for it. So it's kind of like a bunch of people being sort of brainwashed. And I was trying to visually think of a way to do that. So it's going to be interesting as the panels progress and stuff. And I don't know, it's pretty fun. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that one inked, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know. So it's going to be a challenge to kind of get further, but let's get into challenges.
So, challenges. For me, I just getting time in the day. I'm still doing my go to bed at 3 or between 3 and 4 in the morning and wake up when everybody wakes me up, which I'm trying to sleep till noon, and sometimes my family gets me up before then. So, but yeah, it's basically that. Just busy, and still trying to get everything in. So I didn't get to downstairs today until about 8:30. So that's kind of when I was. So I'm there's just a huge chunk of the day, even though I'm not going to work, that's just getting eaten up by a lot of stuff. So yeah. How about you?
So in the thick of rush season, I said that would get old, and it's probably gotten old by now. And then just finding time to kind of do the thing is a real challenge. My son was sick too, so he finally got better yesterday and was able to go to school and stuff. So that's a bit of a relief on his mom as well as on me, because a sick kid means a lot of attention, and we give our kid a lot of attention anyway. But when they're sick, it's you want to be there and stuff. So
yeah,
a little more taxing and stuff. So, but it's not quite as taxing as, like, I think, taking care of multiple children, especially very young children.
Oh man, he's just in the last week or two gotten to the point where it's just like, oh yeah, I forgot this stage where they don't really understand what's going on and they just want to eat, destroy everything, or try to hurt themselves. Like, it's just like, I put him on the bed and I was right there. It's just like, why do you keep crawling headfirst off the bed? Like, I caught him each time because I was like just watching him out of fascination, but it's just like, I can't even sit you on a bed anymore. So yeah, it's just, our house isn't ready for it. I thought we'd have more time. I don't know.
It always sneaks out.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Parenting lessons for anybody out there who's considering parenting or whatever. You're never fully ready, and then if you have another kid, you're still never fully ready. You're just never going to be fully ready.
I think that's just life. It's like, if I try to overplan my art projects, I never start them. If you try to wait until you're ready to parent, you never have kids. If you wait until you're qualified, you never apply for jobs. You spend your entire life never ready or qualified for anything that you do, and then you die. That's kind of just how it goes.
Yeah, I keep waiting for the time that I'm actually ready and feel capable. Right. Hasn't happened yet, but
so
one day.
Right, sure. So how about challenges for you?
That was basically it.
Oh, that you already. Sorry, yeah.
It's okay. I get
the tiredness of it.
I have I think our last art check. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember, and I was paying attention. I was listening to everything you said. So plans. For me, I don't have it pulled up, but I'm gonna keep working on this guy. So by tomorrow night, I need to have the side view of him done, and a walk cycle. And then I probably need to design a movable rig for his face. Right now, that's just a stationary single layer. He's not going to really talk or anything, but I need him to turn his head, which will be fairly complicated with the way I've got him right now. So he might get more simplified, or I might just spend the time it takes to make it complicated. So we'll see. I'm not exactly sure, but he will by Friday will be rigged. I believe I can get a walk cycle done by then, possibly, maybe, I don't know. But he'll be rigged, and I'll have 3 views. The front view that you see now, which is basically done, the side view, which you haven't seen yet, and the 3/4 view, which is actually going to be a series of shape tweens in between those two.
Okay.
And so we'll kind of see. Yeah. So those are my plans. I'll have him finished.
Very brief question, because I know you have kind of a master plan for this whole thing. So since you're using heavy black line on all of your characters, are you planning on kind of color holding the backgrounds, or how are you going to do the backgrounds so they don't conflict with those blacks?
Yeah, good question. I will either have I've got that scheduled I've got some kind of time to play with it a little bit, but I've got 2 ideas. Either I'm not going to do lines and it'll all be fill and lineless, or I'm actually going to be manipulating photographs, photographs and video, which I've done a little bit of, and I really like kind of this style of illustration mixed with you do hue saturation adjustment on a threshold layer, and so everything is just monochromatic that way, and it looks pretty good. So I might do something like that. I don't know. We'll have to see.
I love it. That sounds cool.
Yeah, but the backgrounds will be almost not there. So the things that the characters interact with will be at the same level of opacity as them. But the backgrounds themselves are, I'm thinking like going to be like 20% opaque, just kind of just a suggested element of background. So
awesome. Sorry, I was just kind of curious because that like I use a lot of heavy black, and that's always kind of a conflict with heavy blacks is like background versus foreground, creating that contrast. So
yeah, and the nice thing about still images with heavy black is you can kind of just leave some negative space as you go up to certain parts of it.
Yeah.
And with animation, you could probably do that, but it would look weird because there'd be like this halo around your character, like moving with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a different challenge. But cool. If you look at like Powerpuff Girls,
yeah,
they have line work on the characters and no line work on the backgrounds, and that helps like separate.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I was just looking at that. I'm forgetting the artist's name, but the original background artist for Powerpuff Girls, it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
phenomenal stuff. So that's really cool. You're getting way more done than I thought you were capable of, which is saying a lot because you're capable of a lot. But I'm impressed that you're keeping pace with your schedule.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm still matching my schedule, and I think I wouldn't be if it were different. I don't think I'd be matching my schedule. So if I hadn't done a schedule, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think.
That makes sense. You're being a good art director to yourself. So
yeah, that was really good advice. So
it's awesome.
Yeah. What are your plans?
All right. So I'd like to have, let me see how complicated these are. I think that I will be able to get the next 3 panels penciled, rough penciled by the next Artcheck because we got the weekend and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to at least have, ideally I'd like to be at 3.5, but I will guarantee 3. Salazar's joined us again in the chats. Hey, Salazar. Oh, cool. He mentioned on our last video that it was his first time tuning into our Artcheck, and it's cool to have you. So thanks for joining us again.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So that's all 4. That's exercise, what we did, challenges and plans. So we want to jump into a topic?
Yes. Now I'm going to space out. Oh, yes. Okay. So I think we can make this somewhat brief. But the topic this week is, does the level of fame of an artist affect your perception of their art? And so this is kind of a question that can tie into a lot of things. It can tie into how we let fame kind of affect our perception of things. And I'm sure we could go down a rabbit hole of like, does a tree that falls in the forest make a sound if no one's around to hear it? Kind of conversation. So that's just kind of a thought that I think might be an interesting topic. I'm not quite sure where to go with it. So
yeah, it's interesting from a teacher standpoint. You always hear about those horrible teachers that, all of these YouTube artists and Instagram artists and everybody that are telling their story. They're like, I drew anime in high school and all my art teachers told me that it was terrible and it wasn't worth doing and blah, blah, blah. And now they've got, a couple million followers and they get 100,000 views every time they post a video or whatever. And there's a lot of them out there like that. And so as a teacher, I always have that in mind, like the subjectivity of it.
Yeah.
But I also do think that just because something is popular doesn't mean that it's good. And so there's kind of that balance. So for me, I try to check my own opinions at the door as much as is possible and try to stick with craft and voice and and execution. But I also feel like there are people that are popular that are just objectively not good artists. But that doesn't mean that they're not good storytellers, or not good whatever. They just might not be good at illustration, but they can communicate a message really well, And there are other people that are excellent illustrators, but are very poor storytellers or whatever. So it's a little hard. It's a little hard to judge that, because you got to kind of look at like the entire package, and there are very few Will Eisners out there who is a phenomenal illustrator and a phenomenal storyteller, great writer, like the whole package. And so for me, when it comes to popularity, I do sometimes, when I see a lot of these college students, show me like, oh yeah, this is, I love them. And I try to get like their inspiration for why they're doing things. And I'm looking at the numbers and the metrics, and sometimes I second guess myself, and I'm like, holy crap. I mean, tons of people like this. And so I do think it has some kind of effect. But for me, the effect is often just questioning myself for a moment, and then gone, yeah, but here are the things where they could improve, because popularity, fame, professionalism, age, experience, all that stuff, none of that actually eliminates the fact that everyone has room for improvement, or whatever. And so that's kind of where it comes in my daily life, is that in my personal life, I like what I like, and I dislike what I dislike. And, because I have training and experience in articulating why, I feel like I have really good reasons for that.
Yeah.
I rarely think that I let popularity gauge whether I find art to be good or not. But I don't know. What do you think?
It's a mix, because I mean, the side of me that is the majority of me, which is kind of like a contrarian who likes like independent stuff and small press and like obscure things, would say dishonestly that it makes absolutely no difference. But there's a reality that, like, when I'm at a cartoonist meetup or whatever, if I meet a cartoonist whose like name is huge, I do feel more anxious about that meeting than I would with someone who I've never heard of. And now keep in mind, I hedge that, and I'm less affected by it than I was when I was younger. But I can definitely say in my own life, I have experienced that effect of like being overwhelmed by fame, to the extent of just being at a restaurant and being like, that's so-and-so the actor,
Right.
And yet, the quality of the work, I don't think should be affected by it, but I do definitely think like there is that scenario where, the obscure artist who no one has ever heard or seen could be brilliant, and no one's heard or seen them, including myself.
So the question that I have for you, because this is an interesting scenario, and Kayla's joined us as well. The scenario that you're bringing up is different than what you originally posed, and I think it's an interesting topic to explore. But originally, you said, does it affect your perception of the art? But I think if you look at interactions that we have with other people, we interact with other people, whether you want to admit this or not.
Yeah,
this is the way that you interact with other people. Is you interact with them through your own selfishness, right? And so if I'm interacting with somebody, my immediate thought is, how does this person relate to me? It's not necessarily, my natural inclination is not like, what is this person as a person and all that type of stuff. That's stuff that I try to, like get good at, but I think when you come up against somebody who is famous or whatever, or they've got a really big name, I don't think your initial thought is this person is an incredible artist.
Yeah.
I think your initial thought is this person has an incredible amount of influence, or and that is a different gauge than the quality of their work. So I'm curious on how much that comes into play in your mind.
So that's the thing. Like I said, I just kind of wanted to start it off by being a little vulnerable about it, by being like, I am totally affected by fame, whether I like it or not. Like,
absolutely. And I think everybody is.
Yeah, I get intimidated by people who are like super well known. However, I do tend to gauge work based on its merits, and the one thing that fame can kind of do when I'm viewing art is make me give it a second look just to see if I can figure out the why.
Yeah.
And there are still some artists to this day that I won't name because I don't think it's good to like publicly crap an artist. But there's still some artists out there that have like huge followings, and it completely surpasses my understanding because I don't see like solid story or solid art, or I don't understand the appeal, and that's a tough one. And there's a bunch of brilliant artists I know that I don't understand why everyone isn't just fanatics for. But then there are those rare cases, and I think these are the beautiful cases where the two meet, and you have someone who is like a Will Eisner, like you mentioned, or like in my case, like the person I always look to is like Chris Ware, because I haven't read anything bad by that guy. And anybody who's curious too is following this. Like there's a book coming out called Rusty Brown that he worked on for like 18 years. And that's coming out in September. And I guarantee you it's going to be brilliant because like he's never made something bad. And yet writes, illustrates, letters, like everything's all hand done by him. And he'll invest 18 years into a project to make it right. And there's like there's maybe like 2 or 3 cartoonists out there like that. But other than that, like I do have to say it does affect my perception if something's in a store. It does affect my perception of the art if it has a lot of visibility, because it's like it's human nature. You tend to be like it's kind of like if you're at work and everyone's talking about Game of Thrones. At some point, you're probably going to check out Game of Thrones.
Well, let me ask you
to like it more because of the whole the fact that we're kind of tribal,
like it or dislike it. Like, I tend to if something gets really popular, my natural inclination is kind of like yours, where my initial reaction to something super popular is that I hate it.
100%.
Sometimes even before I experience it, just because that was. Now, Victor brings up an interesting point. Could it be the engagement of the audience? I think this is really, really interesting. So I'm just gonna fire questions at you and add nothing to this conversation. You keep talking about perception, but your perception is your entire experience with the art, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, one thing that changes when I see something on a bestsellers list, which can be rigged, or I see something in a that's selling really well, or lots of people are talking about it, or it's in a store, or it's from a very well-known person. I wonder, and I'm trying to be authentic here. I don't think it changes my perception of the quality of the work, but I do think I get more insight into their audience. Like sometimes I will start thinking more about, like, okay, I don't like this. I might not be in the target audience. Like I'm at the age now where, and this was only in the last like 3 or 4 years, where I go to the mall and I hate everything that everyone is wearing. And then I realize, I'm like 20 years older than everybody, and this is a few years ago. There's like this short period of time where like 1983 came back, where everybody was dressing like they were a 3M highlighter. Yeah. And it was terrible. And I was just like,
neon as a kid,
right?
Seeing it come back, I was just like, really of all the trends, really?
I was just hoping that it didn't stick around as long as some other things. And then we went through the like early 90s where everybody was dressing like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air but like objectively, I can look at that and say, there are rules, there are principles that are being followed or whatever, and I'm not in the target audience. And so I don't know that my perception changes of the quality of the work.
Yeah.
But it does, I often gain insights into remembering, which I think is every time this happens, I have to remind myself this basic rule that I always tell all my clients: you are not your audience.
Yeah.
And so, most business people forget that. I think most humans in general forget that your experience is not other people's experience. And so I wonder, when you say perception and that your perception changes, stuff that you initially don't like, and then you realize that there's a large audience for that, what part of your perception of that changes?
Yeah, see, that's the tough part is there's a couple things. Like, one is I completely am that person who, like, if something's overly talked about, I start to want to not like it.
Yeah.
So a perfect example of that is like I hate, in my head, I hate Tom Cruise as an actor. However, the majority of movies that I've seen with Tom Cruise are amazing movies, and he's actually a pretty great action actor. Like, but I want to dislike Tom Cruise because he's Tom Cruise. It's like I feel like he's like the captain of the football team kind of scenario, where I'm just like, I don't want to like that guy. However, I have no reason to not want to like that guy. And there's a couple other guys like that, like that are just brilliant actors, but because they're so overhyped, I have this inclination to want to dislike them. And there's a lot of artists like that too. But does it affect my perception of the art? Like, well, okay, so I'll bring up an example that's in the reverse of like somebody who was overhyped, I thought, and then I had so many friends that kept pushing this guy. That's true, I am. But like I kept finding people recommending Jeffrey Brown. And I would just look at like the cover of Clumsy and be like, why is this guy famous? Why is he being nominated for Eisners? Like, this is just doodles. It's nonsense. This is when I was much younger and he was kind of at his peak. And I couldn't understand it. And I was almost furious at it. Like it was just like, this is hipster art, that kind of thing. Flash forward to a year after that, when like tons of people I really respected were like, Jeffrey Brown's kind of on to something, like he's doing something really cool. And then once again, like the artist that I really admire, Chris Ware, like talked about him really, really well. And I was like, maybe I should like actually check this out. So I actually delved into it and I was like, oh, he's like a brilliant writer. Like he's a really good writer. And there's something really authentic and great about like his like diary strips. And at that point, I just understood why people liked Jeffrey Brown. Now, was that because he was popular? That's the part that's hard to say. Was it because he was popular that I gave it that second look? Probably. Because I think were he not to have had so much clout and be mentioned by so many people, I wouldn't have really given it a second look. I would have just had that initial look and been like, meh, not really my bag, not my cup of tea.
Which brings up another series of interesting points. One is you mentioned that it was the writing that stood out to you after you looked into him. And so I wonder if
my vision of his art
changed. And
it did, because it serves the art, it serves the story. And so it's like aesthetically it didn't change, but aesthetically it made more sense kind of in context. So it's like, so you feel like by viewing it out of context, I didn't get it. It's kind of like hearing a snippet of a song in a genre you don't know.
This is like one of my pet peeves that people keep doing lately
Yeah.
on Twitter, at least, is some movie will be made into a book, and someone will find the worst written passage in that book and tweet a screenshot of it and be like, "This is garbage," and then everybody jumps on and is like piles on about how much they hate it, and I'm like, you guys are so dumb. Like, I mean, there's 10,000 words in that book, you picked 50 of them, or whatever. But like, I do think it's like, it's cool to like hate things.
Yeah.
It makes you seem like you're above whatever. Anyway, the other thing that, go ahead.
Sorry, I was much more in that line of thinking when I was younger too. Like I was very quick to be like, I hate this artist, and like I changed that about probably about 10 years ago now.
Yeah,
where it's just you start kind of seeing, for one thing that really changes that perception is like trying, and when you're actually in the ring and you're trying, you're like, oh, that guy isn't that bad of a boxer. It's just like, it looks a lot easier from the outside than like, and now that I'm in it, I'm like winded and this is a lot of work. Like that's hard to
just punch me in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing is, I wonder how much art needs our time. Like there's kind of the initial first blush of something where you have kind of your instant gut reaction, and then there's like deep diving into it, and then everything in between. And you take something out of context, and you might not get much value out of it or much experience with it or whatever. And it's just your initial gut reaction, right? But like, anything that is working and speaking to a group of people is going to have elements of it that are good, elements of it that are intertwined with other elements that are being used well, that communicate well.
Yeah.
And until you have some experience with that, until you really give it a shot, you might not have the ability to really understand the art. And so that's an interesting kind of thought process to go through is, at what point in time do you begin forming your opinion? Because I mean, studies show that most people form an opinion within seconds of experiencing something, and then they try to justify their opinion after that. And there's a number of studies that kind of show that. But as trained professionals and as those that are kind of higher level thinkers in the niche of visuals, which I think, I'm not just saying you and I'm talking about everybody in the audience here. Like if you're watching or listening to this show, you're not the average consumer of something. I think that your opinion of something can evolve as there's more nuance and understanding of that thing. And so that's an interesting thing. Does fame come into play in your evolution of your opinion based on because it gives you a reason to stick with something longer or to check something out?
Yeah. And that's a great question, because it's like I'm thinking about just my own experience in like discovering music and stuff. And I remember when I was like knee deep in like getting into punk rock, I met all these guys who were like, you got to check out Bob Dylan. And I'd just be like, I don't want to hear this hippie stuff. And then I heard like one Dylan song and I was like, why do people like this?
Right.
I didn't get Dylan. And then because he's Dylan, inevitably I heard again, and I finally kind of gave an album like a full chance and discovered like, oh, this is probably one of my favorite musicians of all time. And like what he's doing vocally is insane and awesome and kind of crazy and just brilliant. Like he's one of the best songwriters that ever lived. Yet I also, anytime I meet somebody who's like, I just can't stand Dylan, I get it, because I was there when I was really young and hadn't really checked out Dylan. So is it fame? That's the part that's baffling to me, is like, is it fame that's weighed my opinion or caused me to give it a second chance? And then are there a bunch of people who aren't famous that I'm not giving second chances to their art because I'm not being pressed to like give it a second chance?
Well, the answer to your first question is a paradox.
Yeah,
because
it is.
you never know, right? You wouldn't, without him being mentioned to you multiple times, i.e. fame, you never would have given him a shot past that first thing. And so it's a paradoxical situation. So yes, his fame did involve you having more experience, but I also think that like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette or the Jerry Springer Show or Honey Boo Boo or any number of things that would be considered popular that lots of people watch, I think they are objectively horrible. Like, I think they're objectively bad in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, lots of people talk about them and mention them, and they're so they're famous, but then there has to be an additional quality to them to actually have like staying power.
I agree.
So anyway, so that's kind of an interesting question because yes.
Yeah.
But also there's something more.
And sticking with the Dylan example too, it's like around the same time, a lot of people were like, you got to check out the Grateful Dead, man. You got to check out the Grateful Dead. I have given the Grateful Dead so many chances, and I'm never entering in that like jam session world, you know? And like, I kind of get why people like it, but there's never been a point where I've been like, oh, because they're famous and because there's a lot of high level musicians who really like this band, suddenly that door opened. I don't doubt that might happen, but my point is like, if it were fame alone, you know, I would think that suddenly I'd just be like, have my perception changed. Victor in the chats mentions something that I thought was interesting because this is true to my own experience. He said a good example for him was Scott Pilgrim, so Brian Lee O'Malley stuff, and he was saying he just didn't get it or like it, yet he had a huge following. So my wife, like when she and I were first dating, she was obsessed with this book called Lost at Sea.
Oh yeah.
Took me forever to actually read it because the style of art was so close to like the style of manga I'm not a fan of, that I was just like, no, I'm just big eyes. Like, and at the time I was just starting to teach college. So if you don't understand why college teachers are kind of anti-manga, teach college for a semester and see what terrible drawings people present to you saying, oh, it's just manga style. And you're like, no, it's your arm can't bend that way. Like and there's no center line on the face. Like that's not manga style. That's just bad drawing.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so point being, like, for that very reason, I didn't check out Brian Lee O'Malley. And then I read Lost at Sea and I was like, oh, like, cause it's very much like the same kind of scenario where the art fits the story perfectly. And so when you read it in context, it kind of works. And that's when, so by the time Scott Pilgrim came out, I was kind of familiar with O'Malley's stuff and I was like kind of on board at that point. But I totally get why that would be a turnoff for somebody like initially, because it is kind of a weird stuff, you know? Well,
yeah, especially for American comics. But or is he Canadian?
He is Canadian, I think. Yeah. Married to Hope Larson, right? Are they still married?
No, they broke up a couple years ago.
Hope Larson is a far better artist.
Hope Larson is phenomenal. Yeah, she's great. So that was a funny little interchange there. I don't know. It's funny. Like, I don't think I would have any idea who a particular actress is dating or married to, but I just knew some random graphic novelist, their relationship.
You have to know the power couples in comics, you guys. This is
right.
Dish all the all comics goss.
Yeah, it's just because I follow both of them on Twitter. But anyway, where was I going with that? What was going on? Oh, I came at Scott Pilgrim backwards because I had never heard of the comic, and the movie came out, and then everybody started talking about the comic, and then I watched the movie, and I am a sucker for people doing goofy graphics like animations in movies, and it should happen way more. I mean, Stranger Than Fiction and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty and Scott Pilgrim and all. Like, why don't we have more of that? It's so much more interesting than everything else. And so then I checked out the comics, and honestly, I haven't made it through the box set, but it's back there, and I'm slowly working through it. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, and that's another thing where, are you talking art as in solely visual quality craft? Or are you talking art as in kind of the way I view it, which is as the visuals are part of a greater communication, a greater storytelling? Because there are a lot of people that are poor visual artists that are incredible storytellers, and I think that makes them a good artist. But it doesn't mean that they're a good illustrator or a good student of human anatomy or whatever. But they can raise an eyebrow a specific way that makes you think that character is feeling a specific way.
Yeah,
humans would never look like that, but so it's kind of interesting. So I don't know. I mean, it's such a vague question that you could just talk about it forever.
Yeah,
but I do think most of the time, when there's something that strikes a chord with a niche audience, quality of craftsmanship is only one of the variables, and there are many more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I do think, whether we like it or not, I think maybe some of us fight against it, but I definitely think I'd be interested to hear if there's anyone in our audience who could honestly, like, just objectively be like, fame has no effect on how I view art. I'd be interested, because I want to be able to say that, but I suspect that's not the scenario.
You can't. It's impossible, because we're not. When don't ask for whom the bell tolls, because it tolls for thee. We are not unconnected. We're a social creature, and we exist in a society. And the only reason that you know about anything, I was thinking about this the other day, before Soundgarden got really big, a buddy of mine told me about Soundgarden, right? And then they broke it wide open or whatever, and he was like kind of frustrated because their music changed and whatever. Like Bad Motorfinger versus Down on the Upside, very different albums, right? I actually like both of them, and I prefer Down on the Upside now that I'm older. But when I was younger, I was like, angry and teenage and whatever. Yeah. But I always wondered, like, how did that guy find out about stuff? Because this is like 92. It's like, the computers existed and the internet was a thing, but nobody really had access to it. And it wasn't anything other than like web rings and GeoCities and whatever. And so but the reason anyone found out about anything is either you made it or someone told you about it. You know what I mean? Like, you had a primary experience through some sort of communication. And so fame and popularity, just by definition, drastically increases the possibility of that thing being exposed to you.
100%.
So I don't think it's possible for a human being to say honestly that fame doesn't affect how they view the art, because at the very least, it's the only way they know about it. Yeah. And the next level above that is, it's the only reason that they might give something that they dislike a chance enough to like it later.
Yeah. And I can also say, like, it can work in the inverse too, because if you've ever really loved something that, like, no one else has read or no one else has listened to, and you just can't find anyone talking about it, and you absolutely love it, you want it. Like, it's weird. It's like, at least with me, there's always been a split thing, like, for instance, the Pixies. I was really into the Pixies, and then the Pixies got, like, huge.
Yeah.
And I felt like this, like, elation for them actually being known.
Right.
And also, like, this total indie kid thing of, like, but that's my Pixies, which it's not.
Right. Yeah.
I felt a ownership and, like, a loss, because I was like, okay, now this, like, douchebag down the street likes the Pixies, and, like, you know what I mean? Like, which is totally stupid because I've been that douchebag down the street. Got into something late,
Yeah, right.
It would be a perfect example. Like I got into them way after they were indie, and so like, yeah, it like the cool thing is the desire to kind of have things you love get known can also be like a positive of the influence of fame. I will say also, just to kind of try to wrap it a little bit, I want to mention like two really big art history guys that are two alternate examples of kind of fame. One that I feel, and it's a safer bet to kind of bash these artists because they're far, like they're gone now. They're not, and their estates aren't hurting because they're in museums,
Yeah.
But like Dali, to me, is the most overrated painter on the planet.
Really?
I now don't get me wrong. I don't think what he was doing was bad. I think it was kind of cool and unique, but I think just his level of skill, the concepts weren't all that. I'm not a huge Dali fan, and I've always been baffled by people who adore Dali. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, there's other people out there, but there's no level of fame that's going to make me like fall in love with Dali. Like I've tried, and it just isn't happening. However,
well, okay, hold on. Before you lose your train of thought, I've got some questions. Okay. He was a pioneer of that particular craft, and
one of them. Yeah.
Right. And there are others, and I will not put my art history up against yours by any stretch, because you've got me to the mat. But like, that's really interesting, because I wonder, I was reading Brian McDonald's book a few years ago and listening to a lot of podcasts by him. He does the Invisible Ink, and he's got a new podcast. I forget the name of it, but I know that Caitlin listens to it. So maybe Caitlin will jump in and tell me what the name of it is. Anyway, he was saying that like, now I'm going to lose the train of thought. This is embarrassing. Who is the director of Jaws?
Oh, Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg. He was using Steven Spielberg as an example, and everybody's like, "Oh, that dude's a hack." He just blah 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 blah, and it's everything like this. And he's like, he invented the thing that everybody then copied, and so it feels like a hack because it was so good that it got copied to the point of becoming a cliche. But it wasn't a cliche when he did it, because he's one of the people that started it. And so I'm curious.
Spielberg does cliche so well that good luck doing that. Like, right. Take a crack at doing something cliche, and like I can't stand people who bash Spielberg, because I think he's a brilliant director, and like that's just hate because he is popular.
Right. No, but so here's my question: with Salvador Dali.
Well, okay, so
he's blazing a trail. He's not the only one.
Yeah.
But nowadays, you look at his stuff, and through the lens of 2019, I'm like, I've seen more surreal things and more interesting concepts. But like back then, that was like acid trip, mind blowing mushroom type of, and the public just had no concept of how to interact with it because it was so far out there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just curious, because I mean, like his Last Supper is like one of my favorite paintings. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, just the symbolism of it. And it's probably because of when I experienced it, I was at a particular point in time in my life, and there's like a story that goes with that. So I'm just curious. I'm not.
No. Okay. So personal reasons, I'm not a fan of Dali. One is like, if you look at Magritte, who's working in surrealism as well, and it's pretty similar time frame.
Okay.
There's just no comparison. Like the guy, like what Magritte was doing was more subtle and badass and challenging perception in a much more well painted and well designed way.
But did Magritte have a giant mustachio and a huge personality?
Dali as a person, I love. Like, I think Dali as a person is hilarious and amazing. And he used to like appear on like shows and stuff. I mean, like,
Right.
the guy was a public figure and he did great things for art. So as a human being, I like Dali. I just don't think he was a really good painter. And I mean, he mixed so much black with his color to make it dark and white to make it light, and they're all washed out. There's no and his gimmick was pretty much like melting things and bending things. And I like, once again, I just feel like Bosch was doing that in like the 1600s, really well. So like,
I never should have gone down this road.
but I also don't want to bash Dali in the sense of like, I know by mentioning that, why I mentioned that was he is a perfect example of somebody who, like, a lot of people are like, how could you not like? And then I have the polar opposite with someone who's famous that most people can't stand, which is Marcel Duchamp. Like, Picasso's badass, not as a person. See, he's the polar opposite. I feel about him the same way I feel about Dali. Just flip it. Like, he was a terrible human being, but he made some great art. But please don't read his history if you're a fan, because you're gonna not like it.
Yeah.
It's just a toxic human being. but great art. But so Marcel Duchamp, though, I'm a massive fan of, and he's one of those guys who's in galleries that, like, when you have a young art student go through the gallery, they get red in the face just seeing his work in a gallery. Like, how dare this be in a gallery? That's an insult to all art. And I like absolutely love Duchamp, and I like that whole Dada movement and stuff. And that's art that, like, on its face looks terrible. I mean, he put a urinal in a museum, installed it, signed it, and like it became priceless within a month. He's one of my favorites, and yet, but like I said, that's one of those ones where most people look at that and are like, "That's terrible," but I love it 'cause it's so punk rock.
Yeah, I don't know enough to have solid opinions on this, but I hate that kind of crap so much.
Oh, you like Dada though? If you read about it, you'd like it, because
no, I mean, in my master's, I took some art history.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a lot of those movements, but what they produce is so juvenile, and it just feels a lot of it feels like like kids that just do something just to spite adults. Like, it's like, oh yeah, that's what you think I should do? Well, I'm going to do this other thing. And I realize that's like the entirety of art history. Like, that's the reason art changes over the years. But in some of those movements, it becomes so stupid.
So
anyway,
this ties into what you were saying about trailblazing, though. So, like, I don't like a lot of the mimics that kind of came after that, where it was like people like covering themselves in paint, like rolling around and stuff like that. But I like Duchamp a lot because he wrote these essays for like art journals at the time, where he basically laid it out. He was like, the art world has become so full of crap that I could put a urinal in a museum, sign it. I wouldn't even have to sign it with my own name. I could just sign it and put a date, and it'll be priceless. And a bunch of artists responded with like, that is complete nonsense. It's never going to happen. So he just installed a urinal in a museum, signed it R. Mutt, not his name, put a fake date like 1876 or something, and it literally within a month became priceless. And so, what I love about Dada was like at the time, that whole movement was just like basically saying the art, everything you were just saying about the art world, and saying this is ridiculous, and Dada is just basically going to expose that. So it's going to expose like how stupid art gallery owners are. And okay. I gotta say, I absolutely love it. The other thing I like about it is there's a lot of craft to it.
Okay, we're talking about a whole different thing though, because if you're getting into the fine art world, that whole thing is a sham. But we were talking about the quality of the work, not so. So this comes into the other thing with Dali and a lot of that stuff. The personality of the artist comes into play as well, right? If you're looking at fame and art, this comes to the question of, can you separate the art from the artist? There are a lot of people who say, I can't enjoy that person's art because that person, X, Y, and Z. And then the other side of the coin, that's really interesting is that some people's art becomes famous because people enjoy their personality so much that their art is an extension of who they are. And so there's this kind of package deal, and this is something where, if I'm being honest, I can say 100% that that fame influences the way that I look at the art, because there are people like Sean Crystal, who is a great illustrator, phenomenal comic book illustrator. I love that guy.
Yeah.
But because I have come to know him really well through his podcast, and spent hours and hours and hours listening to him, and he's very vulnerable in his podcast. He talks about his struggles, and he's like one of the few people that is just like raw and real, but not in a shock jock way, but just in like this is what I'm experiencing right now. I know for a fact that affects my perception of the work that he does, because like I actually know like that he's suffering as he's doing this, or he's excited as he's doing this. Like there are periods of time in his life in the last few years that I'm like intimately aware of, because they tracked with things that I was doing, and I was listening to his podcast as it was coming out. And so like the whole cult of personality, the idea of like art versus artist, the idea of like separation or combination of those two things. I don't know if popularity or fame comes into play, but definitely personality and personal experience comes into play. I know people that'll go to a Comic-Con and they'll have a really bad experience, and then they'll hate that person's art afterwards, and they liked it before.
Yeah.
And so, so definitely.
I think I want to go into that, but I actually think we should do that for our next one, if we remember. But we should do, can you separate the art from the artist? Because it brings up all sorts of interesting stuff. Like, just to tease it out, like a very recent experience of that is I watched that documentary on Michael Jackson that's like 4 hours. And I have had a whole thing in my head of like whether I can listen to his music anymore. And it's just it's been a really interesting thing, because for me recently I've been kind of like if I go to like grocery shopping and that music comes on, I'm walking through that grocery store with my kid, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want to hear this. Which is weird. And that's a totally interesting topic, because I don't really know the answer. I think that's pretty fresh with what's currently going on. And yet I've always tended to side with the idea of like the artist himself should not affect the art. However, I agree with you. Like if you have a bad experience with an artist, are you going to want to go spend a bunch of money on their stuff? But if you have a good experience with an artist that you might have viewed as like, their art's not, and then you get to know them, and then you kind of take a second look and you want to support that person, it is that's a good topic. But we go way too long if we take that on. It's already at an hour.
Oh, that's such a good topic. So tune in on Monday when we talk about can you separate the art from the artist, or should you? There's going to be all kinds of things. Dead or alive. What?
Salazar asked in the chats is so the money is in toilet art then? Not anymore. So I'm just saying, because after Duchamp, there were like 1 billion people who tried it again. You can't. Yeah. you can't be the first band to get feedback. Like, again, like the first band to get feedback was the first band to get feedback. It's hard to make that your selling point afterwards.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of a number of things, but one is why I distrust research, generally speaking, data analytics, because for the most part, they've told you what has happened.
Yeah.
And you never know what a new idea is going to do. So you can say this type of person reacts well to these type of things, and reacts poorly to these type of things. But what happens when they react to something that is unprecedented? That So anyway, yes, that's a whole thing.
Lots of good topics came up. So
somebody remind us of these topics next time. We're like, wait, what were we going to talk about?
Yeah, it's fun. I find that like a lot of the time when we do these art checks, we'll start off like we don't have anything, and then it's like an hour later,
right?
And we have a million things. So that's a good place to call it, because we can bring those things to our arts. Yes. So I'm gonna go work on toilets, and
I'm going to do the next few things on this list. That's my plan. This is what I'm living off of right now. So it is almost midnight here, and I've got another 4 hours work to do. So
okay.
Okay. We'll see you guys all later. Have a good weekend. If you want to check our stuff out, you can check out the show at coreykerr.com/48hr. That has links to Josh's YouTube channel and my YouTube channel, and it has links, an affiliate link to StreamYard if you'd like to produce something along the lines of what we're producing. And I do want to point out that two people in the chats, Caitlin and Kayla, are doing things on StreamYard, and I didn't catch their whole show today, but they had a live show earlier talking about many of the things that many of us are dealing with, the getting started on things, and whether an idea is a good idea or not, and how do you come up with a good idea is fascinating. So check those guys out. You can click on their names in the chats as well, because we got more art checks going on. And if you want to check out Josh's work, you can go to joshuakemble.com. Make sure to check out Quarterly Stories. And while you're there, go to Tapas, which is a mobile way of reading comics. And so there's a little app you can download and subscribe. That'll help him out. If you want to see my stuff, go to coreykerr.com. You are on Josh's channel, so make sure you like this video before you leave. Hit that little thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And we'll catch you guys in a few days. Have a good weekend.
And there's the like eternal